Well, Mr. O is consolidating his power as America's first dictator. Mr. William Jasper is on the telephone to discuss El Presidente's lust for power. Mr. Jasper is the senior editor of the New American Magazine. Bill, what planet am I living on these days?
Well, you can be forgiven for wondering about that. We all are a bit nonplussed at times. How can it get any crazier than this? The inmates have been running the asylum, and that's why we have been in this seeming death spiral with loss of more and more of our freedoms and growth of more and more government and more regulation, more and more controls. And it doesn't seem that it's getting us any more security or prosperity. So,
I mean, we just look at the stories that I just mentioned as I was introducing you. This is all in one day. The President of the United States compared the communist butcher Ho Chi Minh to Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah, I mean, what kind of parallel universe or perverse universe is he living in?
You know what, Bill? We're all going to be in his re-education camp, where we're going to be taught that Ho Chi Minh was the patriot and George Washington was the criminal, the insurgent.
Well, I recently wrote an extensive article for the New American Online, anticipating Nelson Mandela's demise in the near future, and it was a reprise of many articles I'd written a couple of decades ago on Saint Mandela. President Obama was over there, and Nelson Mandela is being prepared for one of the greatest apotheosis ceremonies that we've ever beheld. He's already been the beneficiary of, unlike any other person in history, more than Mao or Stalin or anyone here in this country, even Gorbachev or Martin Luther King or anyone. He's been given the global tour, the U.S. tour when he came here, and since then he's been elevated to. In my article, I quote all the superlatives that people have laid upon him, and then I go through his history. Nelson Mandela will soon be going to eternity, and we'll probably have thousands of parks and streets and boulevards and highways and post offices and other monuments renamed for him. But
it's unbelievable, and a lot
Ho Chi Minh, Lenin, Trotsky, others will probably follow if this continues. So.
Absolutely. And for a lot of younger listeners who don't even know the truth about Nelson Mandela, he's not the hero that the leftist news media and the college professors and politicians like Obama and Oprah Winfrey and all the people in the media. They as you say, they're preparing this guy for sainthood in the Church of Communism.
Right. I mean, even Mother Teresa, or if you look around, for instance, in my article, I mentioned several people who spent decades in communist prison camps, who were released or who died in prison just recently, during the same time that Nelson Mandela was in prison for admitted terrorist attacks. And these people are Christians who were suffering for their faith, who committed no crimes, who simply were honoring God and were committed to their Christian faith, and were tortured and imprisoned. None of them received any of this kind of media publicity. Nelson Mandela not only was a terrorist, and when he was arrested and sentenced, went through a very extensive trial. But I mean, his own handwriting and his own admissions condemned him, and his gift to mankind has been the necklace, the excruciating torture, death of binding someone's hands and putting a tire over their head and filling it with petrol and setting on fire. A very torturous, hideous death. And the ANC, the African National Congress, under Mandela's, Nelson and Winnie's leadership, and his comrades who succeeded him, Thabo Mbeki and Zuma, who is the current chief, they've exported that all over the world. So it's a crazy world when,
yes, it is.
When people like this are exalted and elevated to sainthood, and others are persecuted for truly leading heroic lives.
That's right, Bill. If you had loved ones in another country, and you saw the news coming out of that country over a period of a couple of years, the government was reading everybody's emails. The government was gathering all their telephone calls. The government was building a massive database in the desert to collect every piece of information about those citizens. The government was getting ready to, to impose biometric scanning on the citizens. The government had taken over the healthcare system. And we just went down the list of all the things that's happening in the United States in the past 2 years. You know, you would be writing and calling your loved ones in that country saying, you need to get out while you can still flee, or you need to prepare for persecution.
You need to wake up. Yes. It's been, and here just, since you brought that up, just yesterday, you may have seen the story that, you mentioned the NSA, and they're reading all the emails, their telephone calls, they're recording all of this. They've just, finished, they're still working on a new $1 billion, expansion of their Fort Meade Center. I've been to their NSA center there in Fort Meade. But then they have their completing their $1.2 billion cybersecurity data center outside of Salt Lake there at Camp Williams. It's a huge, huge whole city they're building there. Largest computer, internet, telecommunications, interception, storage in the world. So they got both of those centers going on there. They're collecting billions of emails and everything that you say and do on your phone and your smartphones. And yet, yesterday, you may have seen this story, ProPublica, an independent journalism nonprofit, requested a Freedom of Information Act from the NSA. They wanted to have the NSA's emails between NSA employees and National Geographic Channel. The reason being, National Geographic had just done this very positive, quote-unquote, documentary on the NSA about how wonderful it is and how secure it's making us. It was really just a big promo for it. So ProPublica says, this is interesting. I wonder what kind of collusion is going on here, what kind of relationship there is there. So we'd like your emails. And so they did. So they requested a Freedom of Information Act. NSA, who's collecting all this stuff, they can tell you, they say they can zero in on anybody. They said, there's no, here I'll quote, this is what Cindy Black, their spokesman, said, quote, "There's no central method to search an email at this time with our records, the way our records are set up. It is a little antiquated and archaic," end quote.
They're probably using old Radio Shack computers.
Yeah, now here's the most extensive, expensive system in the world. They're boasting that they can pick out a needle in a haystack from a statement that some terrorist is going to make somewhere in the world, and they can't even find their own emails. I mean, you can do that on AOL. I do it every day on my various email accounts. I can do a search on there.
Well, you said earlier
that we're dealing with.
Yes, you said earlier the asylum inmates are now running the asylum, and that's literally the mindset I have now. It's reached insanity, and I don't mean that. I don't mean that as an exaggeration. Point. It really is insane.
Well, and what is really insane is if we accepted those statements. That's so outrageous that we have to be demanding, and members of Congress say, hey, look, you're the ones who have been appropriating this money blindly to all of these agencies. You are the ones who have taken the oath of office to uphold and defend the Constitution. The Constitution is a document, is the law of the land, which very clearly limits and delineates what the powers of government, the executive, legislative, and judicial are. You folks in Congress, the House and the Senate, have the majority of the powers. You have created these agencies or allowed them to be created, and you have been funding them. We hold you responsible, and that's what we have to do. Or we're part of the insane folks running the asylum.
Bill, you have been tracking for quite some time, not only under Mr. Obama, but other presidents. But in particular, we want to talk about President Obama because he's the guy in the big seat right now. But you've been tracking a growing list of presidential directives, presidential decrees giving the president dictatorial powers during an emergency. And, of course, the president is the one who gets to decide what is an emergency. Most recently, Mr. Obama signed a directive giving himself power to take control of all communications in the nation. What was in that directive?
Well, that is, it's so incredible. He basically said, and we've done a number of stories on this, on a whole series of his executive orders. And by the way, you mentioned, yes, we did not begin doing this with President Obama. We've been doing this for over 30 years because Republicans and Democrats, we're equal opportunity critics. We believe in holding politicians and officials accountable, regardless of their party affiliation. And so President Obama has continued the process that he received from George Bush, who had it from Bill Clinton, who had it from George Bush Sr., and on and on. But one of the really incredible executive orders that President Obama issued was Executive Order 13603, emergency and non-emergency powers. So this is, he actually issued this a year ago, March 16 of 2012. And this declares that the president and his designated cabinet officers have control over all water, all human and animal food, all transportation, all energy, all construction materials, all health resources, farm equipment, fertilizers, fuels, virtually everything. And what was important in this, it doesn't just say in wartime, it says in wartime or in peacetime. So what is the authority for the president to declare that he has all of this power? Well, there isn't any. And Congress is beholden to the American people and their oath of office to rein him in on this and to strike down that executive order. Now, I could read parts of it, but it says the Secretary of Energy, here's the thing, the Secretary of Agriculture will have authority with respect to food sources, food resource facilities, livestock resources, veterinary resources, plant health resources, domestic distribution of farm equipment, and commercial fertilizer. Secretary of Energy with respect to all forms of energy. Secretary of Health and Human Services with respect to all health resources. Secretary of Commerce with respect to all other materials, services, facilities, including construction materials.
Secretary of Transportation with respect to all forms of civil transportation.
Right. Now, that doesn't just say public transportation, the trains and planes and whatnot.
That says your car, your pickup truck.
Bicycle.
Your bicycle.
This should be a 3-bell, 5-bell, 10-bell alarm for people. If we allow these kinds of paper declarations to assume legal authority, they will be used at some point. And then it's too late to object because we have been complacent and have allowed this power to accumulate. And we constantly see condemnations of the German people, and rightly so, for allowing Hitler to attain power because he did it incrementally, legally making declarations, pushing through legislation in the Reichstag, but many times just usurping power, as President Bush and President Obama have done, and then allowing that to remain on the books and gradually implementing those things. And if one waits until the stamp of boots is outside your door, then you've waited too long.
Everything that Adolf Hitler did was legal. It wasn't moral, but it was legal. He covered his butt. He wrote documents. He signed orders. He had everything in writing.
He intimidated, bribed, cajoled, and forced the Reichstag, and eventually, as he attained more and more power, then people were afraid to oppose him, and that's what we're seeing here. Many of the members of Congress have been bribed. Soon as Democrats and Republicans, when they leave office, they already have cush jobs in agencies. Sometimes a Republican, we see, gets appointed in the next Democratic administration. They may have party labels at the top, but they are quite accommodating of more and more expansive government. And so, as government expands, liberty is really a pretty finite and very fragile commodity. And as government grows, liberty recedes. And so with every temptation to allow government to come in and do something for us, we give up a bit of freedom to be responsible for ourselves, and then to have the freedom not to be controlled by government. That's where we have lost what Madison called for. He said, we have to have a prudent jealousy of our rights, and we have to look with suspicion on every move to increase the size and power of government.
I've only got about 3 minutes remaining, but I want to read directly from this Obama directive, just to give our audience a comprehension of the scope of the power this man is grabbing. The word I'm reading directly from it. It says farm equipment means equipment, machinery, repair parts manufactured for use on farms in connection with the production or preparation for market use of food resources. Fertilizer means any product or combination of products that contain one or more of the elements nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Food resources means all commodities and products, simple, mixed, or compound, or complements of such commodities or products that are capable of being ingested by either human beings or animals. And it goes on in great detail talking about what is a food product. These are just some of the parts of our society that Barack Obama has said he has dictatorial power to control. And it says in this, it says authority shall be used to promote the national defense under both emergency and non-emergency conditions. Well, Bill.
Yes, and that's the part that is especially scary, because we know that in the past, government here in the United States and elsewhere have been very loose with their definition of emergency. They can claim anything as an emergency, but now they're even dropping the pretense of a need to have emergencies. They say emergency and non-emergency. So one can only surmise from that he says, wakes up someday and says, well, I think we need to control all food, water, transportation. I mean, when people allow the government to have complete control over just food and water, I mean, those are the two things that are the most necessary for, other than air. And the government has already taken control over the air, basically, with their global warming CO2 propaganda.
Bill, I got 90 seconds. Do you fear? Realistically, do you fear that we are going to wake up someday and find out that during the night the entire constitutional republic was abolished and we're now in some new form of government?
Well, it is a very realistic fear. As a Christian, I don't fear any threat here on earth, because I know that my destiny is eternal. However, we've been placed here on this earth, and God has given us the command to have dominion over it and to rule wisely and to be good stewards. And so, yes, if we are not vigilant, if we do not wake up enough of our fellow citizens and return to godly and constitutional government, we will lose our freedoms. We will be completely subjected. And all one has to do is project the lines, look at the way things are going right now. And what you've just gone over here today, the articles that we have at thenewamerican.com on all of these executive orders go into quite a bit of detail about what all of these entail, and those are what you call clues. Those are pointing to a very frightening future if we allow it to continue.
My guest, Mr. William Jasper, is the senior editor of the New American Magazine. Bill, thank you so much. Appreciate you being on True News.
My pleasure as always, Rick.